Hey everyone, I'm Jennifer Whitaker, and today I'm going to talk about ableism. And before I get into this video, I want to give you a trigger warning because there is a segment in this video where I talk about the topic of suicide. If that's highly triggering to you, please turn this off and don't watch it. Ableism is the discrimination and social prejudice against people with disabilities based on the belief that typical abilities are superior. Ableism defines people by their disability and assumes that disabled people require fixing. And this classifies an entire subset of the general population as less than, in the same way that racism, sexism, and ageism do. Furthermore, ableism includes harmful stereotypes, misconceptions, and generalizations of people with disabilities. Hi, everyone. I'm Jennifer Whitaker, trauma specialist and autistic individual. Welcome to my channel, or welcome back to my channel. If you get benefit from my videos, please like, subscribe, share, and hit that bell so you don't miss videos, because you may have noticed by now, if you're returning, that my videos tend to interrelate. So let's get back to ableism. Approximately 15 to 20% of the global population are diagnosed with a condition that falls under the neurodivergent umbrella. That's somewhere between 1 in 7 and 1 in 5 people on the planet who are diagnosed. And those numbers don't include individuals who self-identify as neurodivergent and haven't received an official diagnosis for one reason or another. It's estimated that upwards of 40% of the general population are actually neurodivergent and either aren't diagnosed or aren't aware that they have the condition. And that's largely because of societal attitudes. In other words, we're talking about massive numbers of people, not some rare 1% subset. So these are not elusive or rare conditions. One reason the numbers are growing is due to research and just having a greater understanding of the brain, how it functions, and how that functioning can vary from one individual to the next. It might not be the epidemic problem we've been led to believe. It could just be that we're better at identifying it. Therefore, more and more people are finally receiving accurate diagnoses for their conditions. But the real question is, are those neurological differences really pathology? Because pathology indicates a disease model of cause and effect. And if we can pinpoint the cause, we can cure the disease. But maybe it's time that we start asking different questions altogether. Are these neurological differences something to be better understood instead of pathologized? And this makes me think of a quote that is attributed to Albert Einstein, although there's debate. So I'm going to attribute this to Einstein or unknown. We don't know. But the quote is, everybody is a genius, but if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will live its whole life believing that it is stupid. So are we judging fish by their ability to climb trees? Well, through the lens of the medical model of autism, which is what I've been talking about, it's a model that pathologizes the signs and symptoms of autism. And I would argue that, yes, we most definitely are judging fish by their ability to climb trees. And this is a super important topic because it is so much more than just autism awareness. Now, before I go any further, this is where the trigger warning comes in. I'm about to give some suicide statistics. This is triggering. Either turn the video off or skip forward a minute or so. This is a life or death topic within the autistic community or within the neurodivergent community, not just the autistic community. A 2020 study of 54,000 autistic people compared to 271,000 allistic people. Allistic simply means non-autistic. The study found that 1 in 10 autistic people who also have ADHD had attempted suicide at least one time in their life. And that finding is 7 times higher than the comparison group of allistic people. The study also had startling findings for girls and women. 1 in 5 autistic females with ADHD had attempted suicide at least once. So one reason why these statistics are so high and so alarming is due to ableism. Now, if you're thinking about contemplating or idealizing suicide, please call or text the U.S. Suicide Crisis Lifeline at 988. Now, from here on out in the rest of the video, I'm going to refer to people with disabilities because ableism doesn't just affect the neurodivergent community. It also affects people with physical disabilities. According to Medical News Today, there are different types of ableism. One type is institutional ableism, and obviously it affects institutions. And this is what I've been talking about. The medical institution is rooted in the idea that disability of any kind is a problem that needs fixing. And this idea has infiltrated the medical teachings and health policy, thus affecting the entire healthcare system and the well-being of the patients within that system. The second type of ableism is interpersonal ableism, and this takes place in social situations and interpersonal relationships. So this might look like a friend saying, well, why can't you just, when we share something that we're really struggling with? And then if we tell that friend that their approach doesn't work for us, they'll double down and insist that it'll work for us because it worked for them. And this completely ignores and minimizes our differences. Internalized ableism is the third form of ableism. And this is when an autistic person, whether consciously or unconsciously, believes what they're told, that they're broken, that they're diseased, and that they need to be fixed. And this was me most of my life. I didn't know I had autism until I was in my late 40s. And even not knowing, I can look back over my life and see so many instances where I was ableized. Internalized ableism is when we mask, chameleon, and camouflage in order to fit in or appear as normal as possible so as not to upset those around us. It's our way of adapting in a traumatizing and unhealthy way, but we're adapting to the knowledge that we aren't accepted. So we do what we can to find those little moments of fitting in. Also, according to Medical News Today, there are different forms of ableism. There's hostile ableism, and this includes openly aggressive behaviors or policies, bullying, abuse, violence against neurodivergent and disabled individuals. The second form is benevolent autism, and this views people with disabilities as weak, vulnerable, and in need of rescue. This is patronizing and infantilizing of disabled folks, and it undermines a person's autonomy, and it reinforces an unequal power dynamic in society. And the third form is ambivalent ableism. And this is a combination of the two previous forms that I just mentioned. So one person might start a conversation with the benevolent ableism, but they're patronizing the disabled person. And then they turn hostile if the disabled person objects to the patronizing or infantilizing behavior. Now, ableism can take many forms, and some of the more common ones might include not complying with disability rights laws, such as the ADA or the Americans with Disabilities Act, placing disabled students in separate schools, which is modern-day segregation, using isolation or restraints as a way to control individuals with disabilities, institutionalizing people with disabilities, which again is another modern day form of segregation. Failing to incorporate accessibility into buildings, which is not putting Braille on signs in elevators, not including wheelchair ramps. having inaccessible websites, or refusing to provide reasonable accommodations when somebody requests one. Another form is mocking people with disabilities, assuming people with disabilities want to be fixed is a form of ableism. Choosing inaccessible venues for an event, using somebody's mobility device as a handrest or a footrest, or touching their mobility devices without consent. Other forms might include exploiting people with disabilities through tragic or inspirational news stories, movies, blogs, social media. That's so exploitative and pretty offensive, actually. Choosing not to offer transcripts, closed captioning, or audio descriptions on audiovisual media. Using the accessible stall in a bathroom when you're able to use a regular stall without risk of injury. Questioning if the person is really disabled or to what degree they're actually disabled. And this happens to autistic folks all the time. You don't look autistic. You're too smart to be autistic. I've heard that so many times. And just in the short time that I've been diagnosed, like I said, I was in my late 40s when I received my diagnosis. It just made my life make sense, though. And other forms of ableism include assuming a person has to have a visible disability, otherwise they're not actually disabled. Now, ableist microaggressions might sound like, well, you're not disabled to me. I don't think of you that way. And the reason this is offensive is because it completely minimizes our differences and it minimizes our requests for accommodation. It's this equivalent to all lives matter as a retaliation to Black Lives Matter. Other microaggressions might sound like, oh, he's psycho, or she's nuts, or that guy's crazy, or even comparing yourself. I'm so OCD about cleaning my house. She acts like she's off her meds, or this is the blind leading the blind, or my statement fell on deaf ears. Those are microaggressions. And what you may not have considered before is the impact of ableism. And ableism affects everyone, not just disabled folks. Ableism shapes how we see the world and how we think about physical and mental differences. Ableism damages the larger society by reducing access to transportation, education, and the internet. It decreases employment opportunities, which affects the entire economy, not just disabled people. Making people with disabilities more susceptible to poverty. Ableism has put a lot of disabled folks into situations where they're underemployed or unemployed altogether, which easily puts them into the realm of poverty. Ableism fuels bullying, harassment, stigma, and violence for everyone, not just the disabled community. And it causes unnecessary institutionalization, which puts a strain on the taxes that you pay. So if you want to help, please become an ally of the anti-ableism movement. This means working to dismantle ableism whenever possible. And the first step is to recognize that ableism exists, acknowledge that it causes serious harm, and that non-disabled people benefit from how the system is currently established. And this is what is meant by privilege. Now, by privilege, I know that's a triggering word, but no one is saying that you personally asked to be privileged. The reality is, if you are able-bodied and neurotypical, you automatically have more opportunities than disabled or neurodivergent folks for all the reasons that I've talked about today. The privilege is that society doesn't pathologize you for who you are. And I know you didn't ask for that, but we're just asking for allies who can help stand up for us and not pathologize us for who we are. So ways to help would include learning what disability is and how it affects people, not just disabled people. Learn about ableism and ableist stereotypes. Listen when people with disabilities share their experiences, and most importantly, believe them. Challenge ableism as it happens. Correct a myth if you can. Refuse to buy into a stereotype. Stop bullying. Those little tiny moments. Don't say the microaggression. Catch yourself first. Let people with disabilities speak instead of speaking for them, unless they blatantly ask you to speak on their behalf. Advocate for accessibility and inclusivity. Support and enact policies and laws that counter ableism. Believe people when they disclose a disability, especially a hidden one, and don't accuse people of faking their disability. Believe people when they request accommodations and avoid assuming you know what they need more than they do. Avoid touching someone else's mobility equipment without consent. Avoid asking invasive questions, and incorporate accessibility into event planning, whether it's online or in person. So those are just a few things that you can do to become an ally. And again, if you or someone you know is contemplating suicide, idealizing suicide, or even has a plan, please call or text the U.S. Suicide and Crisis Lifeline at 988. I hope you have found this information informative, educational, and helpful. And if you have, please like, subscribe, share, and hit that bell so you don't miss any future videos. But most importantly, especially with this video, if you have found it educational and helpful, please share. This is something that we really need to spread the word on, because the statistics I shared in this video are way too high within the disabled community. Thanks, everyone. I'll see you next time. Happy self-discovery.